Good Tuesday morning. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to Montana This Morning. I'm Victoria Hill. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. Our top story this morning, the murder of Lori Bray shocked and saddened the community of Laurel. Today, the trial for the man accused in her death enters its second day. Bray was killed in October of 2019. Her nude body was found strangled and beaten east of Laurel, just a few miles away from where her car was found the day before. 24-year-old Diego Hernandez pleaded not guilty to deliberate homicide in her death. Yesterday, prosecutors began laying out their case against him. Bray was last seen leaving the Cedar Ridge Casino in Laurel, where she worked. Prosecutors say she was giving Hernandez a ride home and was never seen again. The trial is expected to last several days. In Gallatin County, 2 men appeared in court yesterday charged in a weekend kidnapping in Bozeman. 42-year-old Isaac Cardona and 24-year-old Jamie Sharon Jr. are each facing several charges for the crime. On Saturday, a woman claims she went to meet Sharon, who was sitting in a vehicle near an I-90 intersection. She says when she got there, Cardona jumped out of the back seat where he was hiding, then chased her around while swinging a machete. Cardona allegedly caught up to the victim and punched her in the face and throat. The men grabbed her and sped off down the interstate. It turns out the victim was driven to the meeting spot by another man who followed the suspect's vehicle while he called 911. Police caught up to them and the men were arrested. Cardona's bail is set at $500,000. Sharon's is set at $300,000. They'll be back in court next month. Now it's time to get a quick check of weather with Miller. Miller, here we are. It is Tuesday. What's the weather going to do today?
Hey, I got to ask a question.
Sure, go for it.
Did you get your nap yesterday?
Yes, 2 beautiful, wonderful hours, and I felt good. And then I was able to go get my daughter from daycare, and we played out in the backyard, and you know, it was good. It was a well worth it. Now.
I know you need it. You know, a lot of folks still struggling because of the time change, and yesterday was National Napping Day, so I'm so glad you took advantage of it.
Yeah, and I wasn't the only one. I ran into a few other people who were really tired yesterday too.
Yeah, I'm taking a nap right now as we speak. All right, let's take a look across Billings right now. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday. I hope you had a wonderful Monday. This is a view courtesy of the great folks at Stockman Bank and the weather cam. We're at 35 right now at the airport. Feels like 27. That dew point's at 27 as well. Winds out of the northeast at about 10 miles an hour. We're not seeing any snow in Billings yet, but that could change. More on that in just a second. Let's crunch some numbers. Our highs and lows yesterday pretty much on target where we should be for this time of the year. Now we're going to be maybe a little bit cooler today because we are in the wake, or will be in the wake, of a cold front that's pushing through. Along with that cold front and that moisture out there, it's trying to kick up the rain and the snow. Now we didn't see anything in way of precipitation yesterday, but that will change this morning as we start to see that snow from Ingomar down to Huntley over to Belfry. That is anticipated to migrate just a little bit further west as we go along this morning, so we'll see some flurries here in Billings, over in Columbus as well. And then as we go along later today, this will push off to our east, and we're just going to see some clouds today with highs in the 40s. A lot of sunshine back in the forecast, and like I said yesterday, on Friday, flirting with 70-degree weather. I think that might put a smile on some folks' face, and we'll take a look at that coming up.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. My daughter's just waiting for when we can pop out the kiddie pool and swim. She claimed that the 50-degree weather last weekend was warm enough. I was like, no, it's not. It has to get warmer. So
ooh, it'd have to be like 100 for me to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think once it hits 70, if it hits 70, she's going to be like, okay, now, no, we'll wait.
Let me know how that works out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Miller.
Yeah.
In Wyoming, masks are no longer required today, and all restrictions on businesses are lifted. Governor Mark Gordon made the announcement last week, citing the state's low case numbers and hospitalizations. On top of that, more than 127,000 Wyoming residents have received at least their first COVID-19 vaccine. The state's health officer says citizens still need to act with caution and personal responsibility because COVID-19 is not gone. The World Health Organization wants countries to continue using the AstraZeneca vaccine despite concerns over blood clots. The WHO will gather safety experts today to discuss the concerns, but says it sees no link between that vaccine and blood clots. More than a dozen countries stopped using the vaccine. Experts say the number of blood clots reported were no higher than what is typical within the general population. 17 million people in the EU and UK received the vaccine vaccine, with only 40 reported cases of blood clots. The shot is not available in the U.S. President Joe Biden heads to Pennsylvania today, and Vice President Kamala Harris will be in Denver to talk about the newest coronavirus relief package. The financial help comes at a critical time during the pandemic, when a growing percentage of Americans are starting to ignore COVID-19 precautions. States including Texas and Florida are overflowing with spring breakers. Some doctors fear they could fuel another spike in cases. It's been less than a week since President Joe Biden signed America's nearly $2 trillion relief bill into law, and the details of what it means for Montana are still coming into focus. The Montana legislature has a huge new task to determine how and where to spend this flood of federal money in just a few short weeks. MTN chief political reporter Mike Dennison has more.
The first thing to note is the sheer size of the federal aid at our disposal.
Right now, we're up to what we estimate to be over 2.7 billion, but there are several funding streams that we still don't know. So I would expect it would be larger than that.
That amount alone is more than Montana's entire general fund budget for a single year. And that amount doesn't even include the federal aid going directly to some cities, Indian tribes, and individual Montanans, such as unemployment benefits. On Monday morning, 3 newly formed legislative budget panels began meeting to start drafting the lead bill that will direct how these monies are spent. It's almost like drawing up an entire new state budget, and they have only a few weeks to do it before the legislature wraps up in early May.
It's going to take some effort to get all this aligned, and it's going to take a few tries. We won't get it perfect the first time.
Much of the money must be spent on specific programs as outlined by federal law. COVID-19 vaccines, for example, or child care assistance, housing help, schools. But at least $900 million is part of something called state recovery funds, and those can be spent at the legislature's discretion. Budget Director Almy says Governor Gianforte hopes this money can be spent on items that benefit Montana's economy for the long term, like workforce training for those who've lost jobs due to COVID, or installing high-speed internet where it doesn't now exist in Montana. Senate Finance and Claims Committee Chair Ryan Osmundson believes lawmakers are pretty much on the same page in that regard.
We want to be forward-thinking in how we use it, and we want it to be a huge boon to the state of Montana for years to come. That's the idea, and it's going to take a lot of time to get it right.
The governor's budget director also says lawmakers may be flying blind a bit, deciding how to spend all this money without having yet seen the full federal guidelines. It's a huge job, and lawmakers have almost another $500 million from the federal COVID aid package passed in December that they must allocate as well. It's bound to be the dominant issue in these final weeks of the 2021 session. At the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
While lawmakers were inside hammering out budget talks, demonstrators gathered in front of the Capitol protesting bills they say are discriminatory against LGBTQ people. However, supporters of the bills argue they are necessary to protect religious freedoms. MTN's Sean Riley reports.
What do we want? Respect! When do we want it? Now! This is what democracy looks like!
At the rally, advocates pushed back against legislation that would require trans people to have surgery and obtain a court order to change their gender marker on their birth certificate, limit access to hormone treatment for trans youth, prevent trans youth from competing in high school sports programs, and Senate Bill 215, which would require a compelling governmental interest in order to prevent a person's expression of their religious beliefs.
We're always on the defensive. Every 2 years, we have to show up here and fight for our humanity and try to explain to a bunch of suits why we're in fact people.
Supporters of Senate Bill 215 say it won't lead to more discrimination and that the aim of the bill is to protect the rights of people of faith.
So how far does this go? Does it allow child abuse or spousal abuse, beatings, or blanket discrimination? No. All these things do have a compelling government interest to overrule your belief or your claim to a religious liberty there.
21 other states currently have similar religious freedom restoration laws, and there are examples of cases where those laws were cited in broad ways, such as a funeral home in Michigan firing a trans worker for not wearing a uniform that matched their biological gender on the ground of religious freedom. However, last year, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled against that funeral home.
The people who are pushing these bills forward know very well that this will lead to open discrimination against people who face it every single day. By passing these bills, we will make Montana a place where LGBT plus people are no longer welcome, and we have to defeat them because of that reason.
Similar legislation was proposed before the state legislature back in 2015. That legislation did fail, although narrowly. Only time will tell where the votes will fall on these bills and if they'll make it to Governor Gianforte's desk. Reporting in Helena, John Riley, MTN News.
Supporters of Senate Bill 215 say it will not lead to more discrimination and that the bill is meant to protect the rights of people of faith. Meanwhile, the Vatican is reiterating its stance on blessing same-sex relationships. In a statement yesterday, the church says homosexual unions do not have its blessings. They say it's not licit to impart a blessing on relationships or partnerships, even stable, that involve sexual activity outside of marriage, as is the case of the unions between persons of the same sex. The statement was approved by Pope Francis. Also making headlines this morning, 2 suspects are now charged with assaulting Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who later died after the January 6th Capitol riot. Law enforcement accused 32-year-old Julian Cater of Pennsylvania and 39-year-old George Tanios from West Virginia of assaulting officers, including Sicknick, with bear spray. The 2 men were captured on video discharging the spray. It has not been determined if exposure to the spray caused Sicknick's death. Deb Haaland is officially the new U.S. Secretary of the Interior. The historic move makes her the first Native American cabinet secretary. She was confirmed by a 51-40 vote yesterday, despite some Republicans, including Senators Daines of Montana and Barrasso and Lomas of Wyoming, expressing concern about her views on public land use and fossil fuels. Haaland will be part of Biden's plan to tackle climate change and reduce carbon emissions. The immigration crisis is worsening on the southern border as the federal government works to find housing for thousands of unaccompanied minors. CBS's Naomi Reckham has more on what President Joe Biden plans to do as political finger-pointing heats up.
A backlog of unaccompanied migrant children is causing a growing crisis at the border. The U.S. Border Patrol is holding more than 4,200 minors without parents in overcrowded processing facilities, according to government records reviewed by CBS News. It's a more than 30% increase over last week.
It's very difficult and challenging. And obviously, these TBP facilities are not made for kids.
Nearly 3,000 of those children have been in Customs and Border Protection custody for more than 3 days, longer than the legal limit. A temporary tent facility 500 miles south of Dallas is holding more than 1,000 children and teens, some as young as 4. A lawyer representing some of the minors told CBS News the conditions were so overcrowded that the kids had to take turns sleeping on the floor.
I can only imagine that the journey that they have been on has been scary and treacherous and something that we would never want for our own children.
The federal government will now hold thousands of teenage boys at the Dallas Convention Center for overflow. A group of Republican lawmakers visited the border this week, blaming the Biden administration for the crisis.
The sad part about all of this, it didn't have to happen. This crisis is created by the presidential policies of this new administration.
We have a lot of critics, but many of them are not putting forward a lot of solutions. The options here are send the kids back on the journey, send them to unvetted homes, or work to expedite moving them into shelters.
The Biden administration is now turning to FEMA for help battling logistical challenges for shelter and processing. Naomi Ruckham, CBS News.
The House is expected to debate 2 immigration bills this week, one to protect so-called dreamers, the other would provide legal status for farm workers. Back here in Billings, another sign of a return to normal. Symphony in the Park is coming back for a 49th year and will be open to a full house. It's scheduled for June 27th at Pioneer Park as part of the weekend-long summer fair. The 3-day festival is put on by the Billings Symphony Orchestra and Chorale, along with the Yellowstone Art Museum. And before we take a break, positive Native American characters are finally making their way to mainstream television. Nickelodeon just introduced one named Charles Littlebull. And as CBS's Michael George shows us, he's having an impact on audiences.
He meant the actual library? Oh, you must be Carlota. I'm Charles Littlebull.
Meet Charles Littlebull, one of the first Lakota characters to be featured in a national animated TV show.
Welcome to my favorite spot. I love the smell of books. And grad students who haven't showered in days.
Charles is a Native American grad student who loves tutoring. He recently made his debut on the Casa Grandes, a comedy series on Viacom CBS's Nickelodeon channel, and he's already getting noticed.
He looked good and he looked nice. He was very handsome looking and smart.
8-year-old Wichani and 12-year-old Omaka are fans of the show.
He was very positive, and I liked how they kept him like that and how they presented him as being smart.
Crystal Echohawk is founder of Illuminative, which works to promote positive representation of Native people, who for decades have often been invisible in media or portrayed as racist stereotypes.
For our children, those kind of harmful representations, the science shows that it causes increased depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation.
Native American youth face tremendous challenges, including the nation's highest suicide rate and extreme poverty. The Lakota reservation, Pine Ridge, is home to 2 of the country's 5 poorest communities, with a school dropout rate of 70%.
The ability, to see Charles is going to really give, young viewers the opportunity to see a Native American in a way that I think that they're going to be able to look up to him as a role model.
Let's get this party started. There's going to be a quiz later.
I think it's changing. And I think eventually it'll be way better.
A positive change in representation that young audiences hope is just the beginning. Michael George, CBS News.
Nickelodeon debuted the Casa Grandes back in 2019 as a spin-off of the popular series The Loud House. The show features a multi-generational Mexican-American family and centers around an 11-year-old girl trying to survive in a big Midwestern city.